This food may be silently damaging your gut. You might not notice it day to day. There's no single dramatic moment, but it shows up as bloating after lunch, a foggy afternoon, stubborn sugar cravings, or a mood dip that seems to come out of nowhere. The culprit I want to focus on is one you almost certainly encounter every day: refined sugar and highly processed carbohydrates. In this video, we're going to unpack why these ingredients are so pervasive, how they interact with the living ecosystem inside your intestines, and what that interaction can do to your mood, immunity, and metabolism over time. We'll also look at other common foods that can accelerate the damage and finish with practical, realistic moves you can explore to protect your gut without living in permanent deprivation. If you care about gut health and want clear, evidence-oriented explanations, hit subscribe. Now, let's get into how sugar quietly rewires the inside of your body. First, why does the gut even matter like this? It's more than a food processor. Think of your gut as a rainforest, a dense, biodiverse ecosystem where trillions of microbes live, compete, and cooperate. Those microbes help harvest nutrients, produce vitamins, train your immune system, and make signaling molecules that your body and brain use every day. The gut's immune tissue, the stuff that learns friend from foe, is concentrated there, and the enteric nervous system, often called the second brain, runs through the gut like a parallel nervous system. It sends signals about hunger, stress, and comfort to the rest of you. Some of the chemicals associated with mood, serotonin among them, are made or regulated in the gut. When that rainforest is healthy, it keeps everything in balance. When it becomes disturbed, the effects ripple outward. Digestion becomes noisier, immunity can become more reactive, and mood and energy can wobble. Now zoom in on refined sugar and processed carbs. These are not only in candies and sodas. They hide in bread, sauces, flavored yogurts, breakfast cereals, protein bars, packaged snacks, and even many health foods. The processing strips grains of fiber and micronutrients, then concentrates easily absorbed sugars or starches. The result is food that floods the small intestine with fast-available glucose, a very different fuel than the slow-release energy of whole grains, vegetables, legumes, and intact fruit. That speed matters because it changes which microbes get fed, what metabolic byproducts they make, and how the gut lining responds. There are a handful of mechanisms by which refined sugar and processed carbs can, over time, push the gut toward imbalance. First, sugar is selective fuel. Many pathogenic or opportunistic microbes, certain yeast like Candida, and some sugar-loving bacteria, thrive when simple sugars are abundant. When those microbes bloom, they produce fermentation byproducts, gas, alcohol-like metabolites, and acids that can irritate the lining of the gut. That irritation can present as bloating, loose stools, or a feeling of fullness and discomfort after meals. It's not mystical, it's microbial ecology responding to new fuel. Second, a diet high in refined carbohydrates tends to favor shifts in the community structure of the microbiome. Scientists often describe these shifts using names like firmicutes and bacteroidetes to capture broad groups. While the precise relationships are complex and still under study, diets heavy in processed carbs are associated with microbial patterns that extract more calories from food and promote metabolic signals linked to weight gain and insulin resistance. In short, the microbial community can change in ways that alter how your body handles energy. Third, those microbial changes and the metabolic stress from rapid glucose spikes together can weaken the gut's barrier. The lining of the intestine is coated with a mucus layer. Think of it like a protective moat, and a tight layer of cells that keeps the contents of the gut separate from your bloodstream. When that moat thins and the tight junctions between cells become more permeable, bacterial fragments such as lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, a component of the outer membrane of certain bacteria, can slip through. LPS is recognized by the immune system as a potent alarm. When it enters circulation in higher amounts, it can drive systemic low-grade inflammation. That kind of chronic immune activation is one way gut disturbances translate into fatigue, brain fog, worsened allergies, and even mood changes. Fourth, sugar promotes chemical processes that damage tissue directly. High circulating glucose facilitates the formation of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, molecules formed when sugar reacts with proteins or fats. AGEs can stiffen and damage tissues, and, in excess, contribute to oxidative stress. In the gut, higher AGE levels and oxidative byproducts can weaken cell membranes and the mucus barrier, compounding the effects of microbial imbalance. Fifth, repeated high sugar intake is a prime driver of insulin resistance at a body-wide level. Insulin resistance itself is tied to a pro-inflammatory hormonal environment. When tissues become less responsive to insulin, organs and immune cells shift their signaling, and the gut is not exempt. This metabolic inflammation feeds back onto the microbiome and the barrier, creating a vicious cycle where diet worsens inflammation, and inflammation makes the gut more susceptible to further disturbance. Put together, those mechanisms explain how a widely consumed ingredient can exert silent damage. It's not always an acute toxin you can point to, but a daily pattern that recalibrates the ecosystem inside you. The practical consequences are what matter to people. More frequent bloating, fluctuating energy and sugars cravings, new or worsening food sensitivities, stubborn weight gain despite doing the basics, and mood or sleep changes that don't seem to respond to simple fixes. What about evidence? A range of research, animal studies, mechanistic lab work, and human association studies converge on the idea that diets high in refined carbohydrates change the microbiome and increase markers of gut permeability and inflammation. Some classic experiments use LPS in controlled settings to show how immune activation produces temporary depressive-like symptoms. Those are dramatic demonstrations of the gut-immune-brain connection. Animal models have shown that shifting diets toward highly processed sugars leads to microbial blooms of yeast and pathogenic bacteria, increased permeability, and metabolic derangements. Human studies often report associations. People who consume more added sugars and refined carbs tend to show different microbial patterns, more markers of inflammation, and higher rates of obesity and metabolic syndrome. Association isn't identical to causation. Many factors co-occur, but when multiple lines of study point the same way, the signal is meaningful enough to take seriously. It helps to picture what happens after a typical sugary snack. You eat a sugary cereal bar at breakfast, maybe a granola bar labeled whole grain, but sweetened with syrups. The small intestine receives a quick load of sugar. Certain microbes feast. Yeast and opportunistic bacteria produce fermentation products and acids, making the environment less hospitable for fiber-loving, health-promoting microbes like many bifidobacteria and lactobacilli strains. The sugar also spikes blood glucose and insulin, repeating this pattern several times a day if snacks and sweet drinks are common. That pattern trains your metabolism and immune system toward inflammation and altered energy storage. Over months and years, those repeated micromeals can shift the baseline ecology and the physical integrity of the gut wall. You'll often hear people point at a single villain and expect instant cause and effect. The truth is messier. Refined sugar is a high-probability risk factor, especially when it appears as part of a broader diet pattern that includes other modern processing techniques. Several other common dietary factors tend to co-occur with high sugar intake and can make things worse. Refined seed oils. Think many commercial vegetable oils such as some types of soybean, corn, canola, and sunflower oil are high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats and undergo industrial processing that can create oxidation products. When heated repeatedly, as in many commercial frying operations, these oils produce lipid peroxides that are biologically reactive. In the gut, oxidized fats can damage cell membranes and interact with inflammatory pathways, amplifying the effects of sugar-driven dysbiosis. Emulsifiers and many common food additives are engineered to make textures more appealing and products shelf-stable. Some emulsifying agents and certain thickeners have been shown in experimental models to erode the mucus layer that protects the epithelium or to change how microbes behave. When mucus thins, microbes get closer to the epithelial cells, increasing the chance of immune activation and barrier disruption. The combination of emulsifiers plus high sugar can be especially disruptive. Sugar fosters the wrong microbial population. Emulsifiers remove the protective cushion, and together they raise the odds of barrier leakage. Artificial sweeteners are a surprising example. They are often consumed as a substitute for sugar, yet several studies suggest saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, and related compounds alter microbial composition in ways that can produce paradoxical metabolic effects. In some people, artificial sweeteners are associated with glucose intolerance mediated by microbiome changes, though the magnitude and universality of the effect vary. The bottom line, replacing sugar with artificial sweeteners isn't a guaranteed fix for the gut. High-heat cooking and processed meats introduce their own hazards. Nitrosamines and heterocyclic amines are chemical products of certain kinds of processing and high-temperature cooking. They can damage DNA and tissues and are associated with higher cancer risk in epidemiological studies. In the gut, such compounds can add to the oxidative burden and interact with the microbiome in complex ways. Alcohol, especially in excess, can directly injure enterocytes, alter microbial communities, and increase permeability. Fried foods act as a compound insult. Refined carbs, plus oxidized fats, plus the products of high-heat cooking. Even some commercially marketed healthy foods can be deceptive. Many packaged bars, flavored yogurts, and fortified breakfasts combine refined carbohydrates with added sugars, emulsifiers, and seed oils. The packaging and health claims can mask a composition that, when consumed regularly, feeds the very processes we've been describing. A sensitive topic that comes up in conversations about dairy and processing is raw milk versus pasteurized milk. There are arguments about lost enzymes and altered proteins in pasteurized low-fat dairy, and a subset of people report better tolerance of less processed milk. This area is debated, and raw milk raises legal and safety considerations in many places. It's not a universal recommendation. The safest path is individualized and grounded in local regulations and healthcare guidance. Gluten and modern wheat varieties also deserve a careful word. For some people, wheat proteins can trigger zonulin-mediated opening of gut junctions and contribute to sensitivity or intolerance. Modern breeding and processing of wheat have altered protein profiles and digestibility compared to ancient grains. That said, gluten's effects are not uniform across the population. Many people tolerate whole, minimally processed wheat products without issue. Context matters. How does life course and generational exposure factor into all this? Your baseline microbiome and immune training are shaped early. Mode of birth, maternal microbial makeup, breastfeeding versus formula feeding, early antibiotic exposure, and environmental contacts all influence the initial community that colonizes your gut. Pesticide exposure and lifestyle factors can further shape microbial populations across childhood and adulthood. Those early differences can make some people more prone to negative shifts when exposed to a lifetime of highly processed diets. Others may have more resilience. Importantly, early disadvantage doesn't equal doom. The microbiome is responsive and can change with diet and environment, which means there's room for recovery and improvement at many stages of life. So what can someone do who watches this and feels concerned, but doesn't want to oversimplify or fall into perfectionism? Think in terms of moves to explore rather than rules to obey. Start with awareness. Read ingredient lists and look for hidden sugars in places you might not expect. Bread, condiments, pre-made sauces, flavored yogurts, and supposedly healthy bars. If you're used to sugary drinks, try swapping to sparkling water with a twist of citrus or unsweetened tea to reduce frequent glucose spikes. Move toward whole, fiber-rich foods. Vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains in their less processed forms, intact fruit rather than juice. Fiber feeds beneficial microbes and slows carbohydrate absorption, blunting rapid sugar swings. Reduce frequency and quantity rather than aiming for total elimination. Patterns matter more than single choices. A weekend treat is not the same as daily sugary snacks. Be mindful about combinations that multiply risk. For example, eating a heavily sugared, fried snack cooked in oxidized seed oil and stabilized with emulsifiers is a compound insult compared to a home-cooked meal built from whole ingredients. Consider timing and balance. Meals that pair carbohydrates with protein, fiber, and a bit of healthy fat slow glucose absorption and produce a more measured metabolic response. That doesn't require extreme restrictions. It's about leaning toward whole foods and stabilizing blood sugar across the day. If you suspect significant gut issues, persistent severe bloating, unexplained weight loss, blood in stool, or severe mood or functional impairment, consult a clinician. I'm describing general mechanisms and practical habits that many people find helpful. This is not personalized medical advice. A qualified provider can evaluate symptoms, test where appropriate, and guide an individualized plan. For people interested in further steps, the evidence-based toolbox often includes increasing dietary diversity to feed a wider range of beneficial microbes, increasing insoluble and soluble fiber where tolerated, and reducing ultra-processed foods. Some people benefit from trying an elimination and re-challenge approach under professional supervision to identify specific food sensitivities, but self-directed eliminations can be tricky and aren't necessary for everyone. Probiotics and prebiotics are a complicated topic. Certain strains have evidence for particular conditions, but they are not a universal panacea, and the choice of strain, dose, and context matters. Again, this is an area where a clinician or registered dietitian can offer individualized guidance. Let's circle back and be clear about what we are and are not saying. We are not claiming that a single donut will permanently wreck your gut. nor that eliminating sugar will cure complex conditions overnight. What we are saying, supported by converging research and mechanistic understanding, is that a dietary pattern heavy in refined sugar and processed carbohydrates creates repeated daily perturbations that favor undesirable microbial shifts, promote barrier dysfunction, and increase inflammatory signaling. Over months and years, those patterns raise the probability of symptoms like bloating, food sensitivities, mood instability, and metabolic problems. In many people, reducing refined sugar and replacing it with whole food alternatives leads to measurable improvements in digestion, energy, and sometimes mood. There are practical steps most viewers can safely consider without dramatic upheaval. Start small and sustainable. Swap a sweetened cereal for oatmeal topped with fruit and nuts. Replace a midday soda with unsweetened sparkling water. Choose whole fruit instead of fruit-based drinks. And prioritize vegetables and legumes across meals. When buying packaged foods, scan for added sugars and long lists of unfamiliar additives, and lean toward products with simple, recognizable ingredients. If you enjoy sweets socially or culturally, keep those moments but reduce daily frequency and consider smaller portions. A final caution. A number of controversial topics sometimes appear linked to gut health. Raw milk, vaccine schedules, and unregulated supplements among them. These areas are complex, often legally or medically constrained, and not appropriate for blanket recommendations. Where such topics come up, consult credible sources and healthcare professionals and rely on local regulations and evidence-based guidance. To recap, the "this food" in the title, refined sugar and highly processed carbohydrates, is everywhere, often hidden, and it can quietly shape the ecology of your gut. By selectively feeding sugar-loving microbes, encouraging fermentation and yeast overgrowth, contributing to oxidative stress and age formation, and linking to insulin resistance and LPS-driven inflammation, these foods play a central role in the cascade of changes that make gut problems more common in modern populations. Other factors like seed oils, emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, high-heat cooking, and early life exposures often compound that effect. The good news is that the microbiome and the gut barrier are responsive. Thoughtful, sustainable dietary shifts tend to produce meaningful improvements over time. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more evidence-minded breakdowns about diet and gut health. Check the description for links to reliable overviews of the science and for a playlist that dives deeper into practical grocery swaps, meals that support a diverse microbiome, and what the research says about probiotics and prebiotics. If you found value in this explanation, consider sharing it with someone who's been struggling with digestion or fluctuating energy. Sometimes the small daily changes matter more than we realize. Thanks for watching, and take care of that rainforest in your belly. It's doing a lot more work for you than most of us notice until it needs a little help.